Good afternoon. It's July 12th, 2026. I'm Cy Marie Johnson, and you are listening to Histories of Horror.
And I'm A.O. Knuckles. Today, we are turning back the clock to the sweltering summers of the early 1970s, heading down to the Lone Star State. We're exploring a case that completely shattered the innocence of a major American city and forever changed how we think about the people we trust with our children. We're talking about the Houston Mack murders.
When we think of a serial killer's lair, we often picture an isolated cabin in the woods or a boarded up house on a deserted street. But the predators we're discussing today operated in plain sight. He was a business owner, a polite neighbor, and a man who literally handed out free candy to the local neighborhood kids.
They called him the Candyman, the moniker that should invoke joy and childhood innocence, but instead became synonymous with one of the most prolific, sadistic, and depraved murder sprees in the United States history.
Dean Corll didn't just hunt alone. He did something even more insidious. He turned the neighborhood's own teenagers into his accomplices, creating a predatory network that systematically wiped out dozens of young boys from the Houston Heights area.
For years, boys just vanished into thin air. Because of the era and the culture of the time, the police didn't look for a monster. They looked for runaway teenagers riding off a massive body count as kids just hitchhiking to California. But the truth was buried beneath a boat shed and a beach, waiting to explode into the headlines. Let's break down how this nightmare began. To understand how Dean Corll operated, you have to look at his status in the community. In the 1960s, Corll's family owned and operated the Con Prince Candy Company in Houston. Was known for giving free candy to the kids who lived near the factory, earning his nickname.
He was polite, clean cut, and seemed entirely harmless. But behind that mild mannered facade was a highly organized, deeply sadistic predator. When the candy factory closed and Corll transitioned to working as an electrician, his obsession with young boys only intensified. He moved into the Houston Heights, a working class neighborhood brimming with large families and kids who spent their days playing outside unsupervised.
Kroll knew that a grown man hanging around teenage boys too much would eventually draw suspicion, so he recruited inside help. He befriended a local teenager named David Brooks, and later another aggressive teen named Elmer Wayne Henley.
This is where the story takes a uniquely dark turn. Corll manipulated, bribed, and groomed Brooks and Henley with money, cars, and alcohol. In exchange, he turned them into bait. Their job was simple yet horrifying: lure their friends, classmates, and neighbors over to Corll's apartment or his family lakeside cabin for a party.
Imagine the betrayal. You're a teenage boy in Houston, and your buddy invites you over to hang out, drink some beers, and listen to music. You walk through the door thinking it's a normal weekend hangout, only to have the door locked behind you by a man waiting with handcuffs and a torture board. Kroll had built a well-oiled abduction machine, and the neighborhood itself was feeding it.
Between 1970 and 1973, young boys began disappearing from the Heights at an alarming rate. 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, gone without a trace. The grief and panic among the families was palpable, but when they turned to the Houston Police Department, they were met with a wall of apathy.
The early 70s was the height of the hippie counterculture movement. The police default setting for a missing teenager was they ran away. Officers told devastated parents that their sons had probably just grown out of their hair and hitchhiked out to the state to join a commune or find work in California.
In some cases, Corll actually forced the boys to write postcards or letters to their parents before he killed them, stating that they had run away to find jobs. These forged or coerced notes completely derailed the police investigation, giving law enforcement an excuse to file the cases away as runaways.
While the police kept their eyes closed, the body count skyrocketed. Kroll subjected his victims to unimaginable torture, binding them to a custom built plywood board before strangling or shooting them.
When it was over, Corll, Brooks, and Henley would wrap the bodies in plastic, pack them with lime to accelerate decomposition, and bury them. They used a rented boat storage shed in Houston, the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn, and the sands of High Island Beach as their mass graveyards. Dozens of boys disappeared into these hidden tombs while their parents desperately searched the streets.
The horror finally came to an abrupt, violent end on the morning of August 8th, 1973. 17-year-old Wayne Henley had brought over two friends to Corll's house on Pasadena Street, a 15-year-old boy named Timothy Curley and a 19-year-old girl named Rhonda Williams.
During the gathering, Corll became enraged when Henley brought a girl into the house, as it violated his strict operational pattern. As the night wore on and the guests fell asleep, Corll acted. Henley woke up to find himself, Curley, and Williams all bound, with Corll threatening to torture and kill them all.
Henley, realizing that his compliance with the monster no longer guaranteed his own safety, began to bargain. He begged Corll for his life, promising he would help him torture the others if Corll would just untie his hands. Corll, remarkably, agreed.
It was the fatal mistake the Candyman would ever make. The moment Henley's hands were free, he secured a 22 caliber pistol that belonged to Corll. As Corll advanced on him, Henley didn't hesitate. He fired multiple shots, striking Corll in the chest and forehead. The Candyman was dead on his own floor.
Henley immediately called the police to report the shooting, claiming self-defense. But when the detectives arrived and began questioning Henley and Brooks, the horrifying house of cards collapsed. Henley broke down and confessed not just to the shooting, but to the years of systematic slaughter that preceded it. He agreed to lead police to the burial sites, unleashing a media storm that shocked the world.
What followed was one of the most gruesome excavation processes in American history. Television cameras broadcasted live as police dug up the dirt floor of the rented boat shed in Houston, pulling body bag after body bag from the earth.
Final official body count stood at 28 victims, though investigators to this day suspect three may have been more. There had been more who were never found. David Brooks and Wayne Henley were both convicted for their roles in the murders and sentenced to life in prison, closing the book on the living accomplices.
But the legacy of Dean Corll remains a dark stain on the history of criminal justice. It was a failure of the system to protect the most vulnerable, a tragic reminder of what happens when the cries of families are ignored by the authorities. The Candyman used his sweetness to mask a bitterness that destroyed an entire generation of Houston youth.
That brings us to the end of today's deep dive into the shadows of the past. Thank you for tuning in to Histories of Horror.
We appreciate every single one of you. Remember, stay vigilant, protect your loved ones, and never forget that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones smiling and handing out treats in broad daylight. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll see you next time on Histories of Horror. Goodbye.